in Syria. I want to bring in our next guest, Valeria Gholizadeh. She is the Syria coordinator, country coordinator for Relief International. What are the immediate needs as you assess them right now?
Thank you so much for having me, Becky. The situation is very, very volatile, I would say. So it's difficult to be very certain about any information we can share at this stage. The situation, the Syria that we knew, also in terms of humanitarian crisis, is changing rapidly. But we can for sure say that the humanitarian needs of the population on the ground are still immense. And they will require a lot of support for the different humanitarian actors that are on the ground. We still support displaced people. We're talking about, yes.
Yeah, you've predicted that Syrian communities will continue to be displaced en masse. Why is that?
Well, because returns, they take time. We are talking about people who have been displaced either inside the country or they became refugees in other country for many years. In the meanwhile, their community of origins, the places where they came from, they also have witnessed destruction, like infrastructure is no longer there. Basic services are very partial and not enough to support the population. Also, livelihood opportunities are very scarce. So people who are gonna try to go back, we've seen also images of a lot of people crossing borders or taking their cars or any means of transportation to move to the locations that were under the government of Syria until a few days ago. They're definitely going to check their communities, their houses, their families, but I don't see all of them being able to stay or rebuild their lives in a very short amount of time. And therefore, this means that humanitarian organizations are going to have to continue supporting displaced people for quite some time while the reconstruction can take place.
Well, you will have just heard Antony Blinken speaking on the tarmac in Aqaba in Jordan. He has just been in country speaking to King Abdullah of Jordan and his foreign minister. He is now on the way, of course, to Turkey, two countries, Jordan and Turkey, which have a significant number of those who have been displaced from Syria. Some 3 million Syrians, as we understand it, displaced into Turkey, of course, and another million or so displaced into Jordan at this point. And Antony Blinken talking about the importance of a coordinated and unified approach from the international community to build up and build out support for Syrians. And there will be short, medium and long-term approaches baked into this narrative, of course, for Syria. Your efforts are very much in the immediate term, and then what happens longer term. This will clearly require a global effort to help Syria through this transition. I wonder, from your perspective, in terms of humanitarian support, what it is that the country will need now and in the longer term.
Definitely access to basic services. We've been providing for years health support, so supporting hospitals, primary health clinics, making sure that people who are sick or injured, they can access free healthcare. That's going to remain extremely essential. Protection services for women, children, vulnerable population, but also food support. We know that, again, livelihoods and food production is still problematic inside Syria, and therefore this type of assistance will be much needed. We are now also approaching the winter season with people who are displaced or living in situations that are not meeting minimum standards, and therefore they will require blankets and other type of support, probably also new type of shelters and living situation, especially if they're on the move. So all these type of basic services are still gonna be needed for quite some time. And then the rest, let's say, of both the humanitarian work and development will need to be defined. The situation definitely has changed, so we need to check again what are the needs on the ground, what the communities want to have implemented, and what type of services they will need. So I really hope that we will all be able to coordinate and make sure that we support the Syrian population in this difficult and transitional time.
Syria has been under sanctions now for decades. Those were increased since the civil war began back in 2011. And this includes being excluded from the SWIFT transactions facility. And that will mean it is much more difficult to get stuff into Syria and for Syria to afford to be able to pay or to be able to access stuff from outside of the country. Now, I know that you're not a politician, but I'm going to put this to you because I think it is important. As the US looks to increase its support and help coordinate efforts for Syria going forward, so there are appeals for the lifting of some of those sanctions to ensure that Syria can access the help that it needs. Would you, as an organisation, do you believe across the board as the humanitarian sector, would you support the lifting of some of those sanctions to ensure the most efficient and effective access for Syria and Syrians going forward?
Becky, as you mentioned, I'm a humanitarian worker, so definitely the discussion on whether to impose sanctions or lift them is definitely more a political one. What I can say is that we need channels to be able to support Syrians and keep providing humanitarian services. So my appeal as a humanitarian is to keep these considerations as part of the debate about the sanctions. And it's not just about the sanctions, it's also making sure that we are able to bring in supplies so that the borders are open and we are able to provide the support to the population. So I think that should be a very important imperative to also inform this type of discussions, that I'm sure they have also other, let's say, elements that need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, understood. And I know how important, in the first instance, those humanitarian corridors are in providing, quick and very effective access to those who need it most. So we very much appreciate your time. I know you must be extremely busy. We commend your work, and we hope to speak to you in the days and weeks ahead. Valeria, thank you very much indeed.